Check your change. The US mints shocking 2026 scarcity. Right now, in your wallet, in the change jar on your kitchen counter, there may be sitting 250,000 pieces of American history, and almost no one knows to look for them. The United States Mint just made a decision. That breaks 250 years of how American currency has worked. They are not selling this coin. They are not announcing where it will appear. They are simply releasing it into the hands of ordinary people, quietly, deliberately, and once it leaves the bank vault, there will be no way to pull it back. So the question is not if this coin exists. The question is it already in your pocket right now? Stay with this video until the end, because what the mint did next reveals something far bigger than a coin. Now, before we go any further, I want to ask you for a small favor. If you've been with this channel for a while, you already know how this works. But if this is your first time here, let me say it plainly, the way I'd say it to a neighbor sitting across the porch from me. If you find value in what we share here, if it helps you see your money, your coins, your savings a little more clearly, would you consider subscribing to the channel? It costs nothing. It takes one tap. And it means the world to a small channel like ours trying to bring you honest, careful analysis, not hype, not noise, just the truth about what's happening to American currency. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching this from today? Drop your city, your state, your country down in the comments below. It always amazes me how far this conversation travels. Now, let's get into it. In the quiet machinery of American government, certain decisions arrive without fanfare. They are buried in press releases, filed under routine updates, and ignored by almost everyone, except those trained to notice when something does not fit the pattern. In the spring of 2026, the United States Mint made one such decision. On the surface, it appeared to be nothing more than a coin announcement. Beneath the surface, it was something else entirely, a signal that deserved the attention of anyone who studies how value moves through an economy. The announcement was simple enough. The Mint would release a new quarter dollar to mark the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The design featured the Liberty Bell on one side and a portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the other. This alone was unremarkable. Commemorative coins are common. Anniversaries are celebrated often. But buried within the announcement was a detail that changed everything. The Mint revealed that 250,000 of these quarters would carry a special mark, a small symbol commemorating July 4th, and that these coins would not be sold, not be reserved, and not be made available through any collector channel. Instead, they would be placed randomly into circulation. They would travel through banks, into cash registers, into pockets, into the ordinary flow of daily commerce, indistinguishable from any other quarter, until someone happened to look closely enough to notice. To the average person, this might sound like a charming gesture, a small surprise hidden in everyday change, but to someone trained in recognizing patterns of scarcity and value, it raised a far more serious question. Why would a government institution choose to manufacture rarity on purpose and then release it into an uncontrolled system, with no way to track where it would land or who would find it? This was not how the Mint had operated before. In the past, limited and special coins were sold directly. A collector could visit a website, place an order, and know exactly what they were paying for. The system, while sometimes frustrating in its high demand, was at least transparent. Buyers competed for access, but they understood the rules of the game. This new approach abandoned that structure entirely. There would be no line to join. There would be no purchase to make. There would only be searching and luck. This shift mattered more than it first appeared. When value is distributed randomly through a system as large and fast-moving as the national money supply, it creates a new kind of imbalance. Most people will never know these coins exist. They will spend them, save them, or hand them back across a counter without a second glance. A small number of people, however, will know. They will be watching their change carefully, checking dates, checking marks, separating the ordinary from the rare. The gap between those two groups, the informed and the unaware, is where opportunity quietly begins to form. This is not a new idea in economics. Throughout history, whenever an institution introduces scarcity into a system that most participants do not fully understand, a small advantage opens up for those paying close attention. It happened with rare stamps. It happened with limited print runs of early stock certificates. It is now happening on a smaller and more personal scale inside the coins jingling in pockets across the country. What makes this case especially worth studying is the timing. 2026 is not an ordinary year. It marks 250 years since the founding of the nation, a milestone heavy with symbolism. Institutions, when given a symbolic moment like this, often use it to test new behavior, releasing something unusual, watching how the public reacts, and learning what that reaction reveals about trust, attention, and engagement with the monetary system itself. For the business person, the entrepreneur, the careful observer of economic behavior, this story is not really about a coin at all. It is about how scarcity is created, how information spreads unevenly, and how a small decision made quietly in a government office can ripple outward into millions of pockets, purses, and cash drawers across the country. The coin itself is almost beside the point. What matters is the pattern it represents. And that pattern is only beginning to unfold. To understand why this coin matters, one must first understand the size of the system it is entering. The United States produces billions of quarters every single year. They move through vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, and cash registers in numbers too large for any single person to track. Against that backdrop, 250,000 coins is not a large number. It is, in fact, a number so small that it borders on invisible. And that, more than anything else, is the point. When something is produced in true mass quantity, it carries no weight. When something is produced in careful, limited quantity, it begins to carry meaning. The Mint understood this distinction well. By choosing a number small enough to feel rare, yet large enough to actually appear in daily transactions across the country, they created something rare enough to matter, but common enough to actually be found. This is a deliberate balance, not an accident. Consider how this differs from the way valuable coins have entered circulation in the past. Sometimes rarity happens by mistake. A production error, a forgotten die, a misprint that slips past inspection. These events create value because they were never supposed to happen. The world did not plan for them. They are rare because they are mistakes. This situation is the opposite. Nothing about it is an accident. The Mint planned the design. The Mint chose the number. The Mint chose the timing, releasing these coins just before a major national holiday tied directly to the anniversary being celebrated. Every part of this was constructed with intention. That distinction matters greatly to anyone studying how institutions behave, because intentional scarcity reveals something about strategy that accidental scarcity never can. There is also the matter of distribution, and this is where the story becomes genuinely strategic. The Mint did not sell these coins through its website. It did not offer them to dealers. It did not create a special purchase window where collectors could compete for early access. Instead, the coins were shipped to banks and financial institutions as part of the normal flow of currency, mixed in with millions of ordinary quarters, bearing no special mark at all. This decision removes something important: control. Once these coins enter a bank's vault and get distributed to branches across the country, the Mint itself loses any ability to predict where they will end up. A coin minted with the intention of celebrating Philadelphia's role in history could just as easily end up in a small town hundreds of miles away, exchanged for a cup of coffee by someone who never even glances at the date on a quarter. For people who study how institutions move and protect value, this should raise an immediate question. Why surrender control entirely? Why not simply sell directly the way previous limited products were sold and guarantee outcomes? The answer points towards something other than profit. A program built purely to generate revenue would almost certainly keep control close, selling directly to capture every possible dollar. A program built instead to generate attention, engagement, and a sense of public participation behaves very differently. It spreads itself out, lets go of control, and allows the public to discover it organically. This is the deeper mechanism worth noting. The Mint is not simply distributing currency. It is distributing a search. It is creating intentionally a reason for ordinary people to look more closely at something they normally ignore completely: the coins passing through their hands every day. In doing so, it transforms a passive system, one where money simply moves from person to person without thought, into an active one, where attention itself becomes part of the transaction. This is not unlike strategies used in business and marketing, where companies sometimes release limited versions of common products, specifically to drive engagement rather than direct sales. The goal is not always the item itself. Often, the goal is the behavior the item produces: the searching, the checking, the sharing of discoveries with friends and family. What the Mint has built here, whether by design or by natural consequence, is a small but functioning model of how scarcity, distributed without centralized control, can generate widespread attention at almost no direct cost. The 250,000 coins are simply the mechanism. The real product being distributed is curiosity itself, and curiosity, once released into a system this large, is very difficult to contain. Nothing happening in 2026 is entirely new. History offers a long record of moments when scarcity, introduced into a monetary system, created consequences far larger than the object itself. Studying these moments carefully reveals a pattern, and that pattern helps explain what may happen next with this particular coin. Consider the well-known case of coins struck in unusually low numbers during certain years of American minting history. In several instances, a coin that looked completely ordinary at the time it was issued became, decades later, one of the most valuable pieces a collector could own. The owners at the time had no idea what they were holding. They spent these coins, saved them in jars, or passed them along in everyday transactions, never imagining that low production numbers would one day translate into significant financial value. The lesson is consistent. Scarcity often goes unnoticed by the very people holding it, and that unawareness is precisely what allows value to grow quietly over time. There's also a more recent precedent worth examining closely. In 2019, the Mint introduced quarters carrying a special mint mark, available only through a limited number of channels, immediately becoming sought after by collectors. Those coins, however, were never placed directly into general circulation in the same uncontrolled way. They were distributed through specific, traceable channels. Collectors knew where to look because the Mint told them where to look. The 2026 case breaks from that precedent entirely. There is no designated source. There's no specific bank branch, no particular region, no predictable starting point. This represents a meaningful departure from how the Mint has handled limited releases in the recent past, and it suggests a shift toward releases designed to spread unpredictably through the system rather than concentrate in identifiable locations. This unpredictability connects to something important in how value gets confirmed in the world of rare currency, the grading and certification process. A coin found in pocket change, no matter how rare, carries little proven financial value on its own. Its true worth only becomes measurable once it passes through professional grading, where independent experts examine its condition and assign it a formal score. A coin graded highly, particularly one found in excellent, uncirculated condition, can command a price far beyond its face value. A coin found worn, scratched, or heavily circulated may carry barely more value than the 25 cents printed on its face. This detail matters enormously for anyone trying to understand the real opportunity here. Discovery alone is not enough. A person could find one of these rare coins in their pocket and still walk away with almost nothing of additional value if the coin shows signs of heavy wear. The entire opportunity depends on two separate skills working together. First, the ability to notice the coin at all among thousands of ordinary ones, and second, the patience to protect, preserve, and properly submit that coin through a recognized grading process. This two-step requirement explains why scarcity by itself has never been the full story in any market, whether it involves coins, rare documents, or limited business assets. Scarcity creates the possibility of value. It does not create the value itself. Verification does that. Without a system to confirm authenticity and condition, even the rarest item in the world struggles to command a premium price because buyers have no reliable way to trust what they are looking at. This is the principle worth carrying forward, far beyond the subject of coins. Anyone building value in business, in collectibles, or in any limited asset must understand that rarity is only the beginning of the equation. The infrastructure surrounding that rarity, the systems of verification, trust, and proof, is what ultimately determines whether scarcity translates into real financial outcome or simply remains an interesting story that fades quietly with time. Stepping back from the coin itself, a larger question comes into focus. Why would a government institution choose this particular moment, this particular method, to engage the public in this way? The answer lies not in numismatics, but in timing, symbolism, and the quiet mechanics of public trust. 2026 marks 250 years since the founding of the nation. Anniversaries of this scale do not occur often, and institutions tend to treat them differently than ordinary years. They become opportunities, moments when public attention is naturally higher, when symbolism carries more weight, and when a population is more receptive to participating in something tied to shared history. The Mint did not release this coin in isolation. It released it inside a year already primed for national reflection, where a quarter found in pocket change could feel, briefly, like a personal connection to something much larger than money itself. This timing deserves close attention from anyone who studies how institutions behave during periods when public trust requires reinforcement. Currency, more than almost any other object in daily life, depends entirely on shared belief. A dollar holds value only because enough people agree that it does. A coin matters only because a system exists that everyone trusts to honor it. When that underlying trust feels uncertain, institutions often look for ways to reconnect the public with the currency itself, not through explanation or policy, but through experience. A small surprise, hidden in plain sight, achieves something that a press release never could. It turns an abstract concept like national currency into something physical, something searched for, something briefly exciting to hold. There's also a quieter signal worth noting. Institutions rarely test entirely new behavior during ordinary years. They test it during years already filled with attention, where any reaction, positive or negative, will be absorbed into a larger wave of public interest rather than standing out on its own. By introducing an uncontrolled scarcity model during the 250th anniversary, the Mint created conditions where it could observe how the public responds to randomness, to discovery, and to participation, all while the broader narrative of national celebration absorbed most of the attention. Whether this becomes the new standard for future releases, or remains a single experiment tied to a single anniversary, depends entirely on how this moment is remembered. For the business person studying this pattern, the lesson extends well beyond government currency. Institutions of every kind, financial, corporate, and otherwise, often introduce structured unpredictability during periods of heightened attention, using the cover of celebration to learn something deeper about engagement, trust, and behavior. The coin becomes a case study in a much larger principle. Symbolic moments are rarely just symbolic. They are frequently used, deliberately, as low-risk environments to test how people respond when given a reason to pay closer attention to a system they normally take for granted. What remains is the final and most important question, one that connects every part of this story together. If scarcity can be engineered, distributed without control, and tied deliberately to a moment of national symbolism, what does that suggest about how attention, trust, and value will be managed going forward, not just in currency, but across every system built on public belief? That synthesis, and what it means for those paying close attention, is where this analysis turns next.